I'm Renee Kumor, and today I'm here to interview author Kerry Reichs. Kerry was kind enough to visit us at Bookfest this year at Blue Ridge Community College. Kerry was first published in 2008, and she writes novels from the perspective of a younger woman. So, as you can see, our interview is going to be a challenge with age gap here. But Kerry started out as an attorney and one day decided, but you have to tell us that story, Kerry. One day you decided that law wasn't for you?
I just decided today was the day I decided to write a novel. It's a fairly unconventional way to approach a full-length book, but I did not take a lot of writing classes. I had not had a stack of manuscripts in my drawer. I just waited thinking some tragic event had to happen to me to enable me to tell a story of great import. And I hit 35 and thought, gosh, I'm not really sure what I'm waiting for. I have some funny stories to tell, and I like writing, so maybe it's time to just take the plunge. And naturally, when one quits one's law firm job and takes a sabbatical to write a novel, you have to drive cross-country to Venice Beach, California to get the whole experience. And that's what I did, and that's where my first book, The Best Day of Someone Else's Life, came from.
Well, first of all, you had to mention age. I thought we should have set some ground rules. We're not talking about age when you and I are on the same stage. But you have written 3 books.
Yes.
And you alluded to the first book. Can you tell me the kind of, book authors talk about genre. So if we were talking about your genre, what is it?
I'm always stymied by that question because frankly, the genre would be women's fiction, but when you ask anyone in the industry or any writer, frankly, to define women's fiction, we have no idea what that is. It's basically anything about, by, or concerning women. If I was going to narrow it down, I think there are 2 main things that I cover in my writing. I write about women that are slightly out of step with social, conventional traditions. In my first book, it's marriage. In my second book, it's sort of lifetime experience, things happening when you're too young. And my third book, it's about family, non-traditional families. And then that leads into the second category of what I write, which is I basically try to take a story that's very familiar and I make it unfamiliar. So you have in my first book, the Mary tale, the woman with the fantasy of the big white dress and the shiny, shiny shoes. But I flip it around a little bit. And after a little 27 dresses experience, she's like, I am never getting married. And then suddenly she meets a man who is very interested in getting married. And so, there's that back and forth. In my third book, it's unconventional families. It's a woman struggling with the career versus family decision, but I make her single. It's a parent struggling with adoption, but I make him a single straight male. I like to take something that is an age-old question presented in a new format to sort of stimulate thought about that. And then I make it familiar again through the voice of the character, just someone that you know. It could be you, it could be your friend, it could be your parent, it could be your child, but this is a familiar voice, and so it brings home the message.
Well, I've heard you refer to your work as a pleasant diversion, but I've also read all 3 of your books, and yes, they're entertaining, and yes, you do have some just charming, humorous episodes. But clearly you write very thoughtful. So how do you become this pleasant diversion disguised as philosophical?
Well, it's a tricky question because comedy is my tempo, but I like to take on bigger issues. You can imagine the dull thud with which my agent received my jubilant telephone call. I'm going to write a comedy about cancer. I think the way I approach it is some of the meatiest and most difficult issues that we each wrestle with, there's always humor in it. The resounding story of humanity is resilience. And as you once again pull yourself out of the mud over and over again, you got to get on the other side of the bank and be like, I'm muddy, that's kind of funny. I fell on a banana peel. So it's what keeps people going. And when you're dealing with the hardest issues, having a little humor about it not only makes you understand it, but it makes you recognize the duality of everything.
Well, with your attorney background, and we all know that there are attorneys who write from an attorney perspective, I didn't find an attorney in any of your books.
Oh, she's in there. Well, I can give you an example with my second book. It's about a road trip. My agent calls it Thelma and Louise meets Northern Exposure. And my heroine drives cross country in a very decrepit 1978 Plymouth Roadrunner and has a series of misfortunes along the way. And as she did that, I was driving cross country. I did that 7 times to research my book because I believe in accuracy, and I really want to capture the experience that she had driving and tell it correctly. So, I can tell you there's some thoughtful commentary on what it's like to use a truck stop restroom that it comes from a real experience. Other stories I saved for my next book. I drove cross country with 2 cats, and that's a whole nother novel. But what I did is this blend of creating a fictional place so I could have the devices I needed to tell the story I wanted to tell, but really rooting it in reality. The third one, again, similarly, I'm fascinated by issues of medical legal ethics. So I like to take my characters and put them in a murky gray of issues where we're just 10 steps ahead of where our laws are today. So science now enables us to do so many things that our society hasn't really caught up with in understanding, and our laws are inadequate to address. So as we advance in science and medicine, particularly in the area of addressing fertility, embryo personhood, biological preservation of human materials, and how we use those to help create a very age-old experience of family, there's a lot of gaps where the law is absent, and yet we're muddling into that space as humans and struggling to address these issues. And that's very much at the heart of What You Wish For. So a little bit of the lawyer-ish and a little bit of the law. Okay.
When you talk about these stories, you talk about, especially in this one, which was your first book.
Yes.
The Best Day of Someone Else's Life. You did show a lot of your comedy when you talked about the 27 dresses and all of the weddings you were in. Do you still know these people? You gave me some idea of what was happening to some of them, and talked about their lives didn't meet the expectation of their wedding. Do you have any more comment? Has it changed your life about and your attitude toward marriage as you look back on them?
Absolutely. Well, as I always vehemently explain to my friends, none of the characters in the book are actually reflective of individual humans. They're really compilations of several experiences. When I was writing the book, one of my early readers said, listen, you don't have to cram in every funny story that you've been saving your whole life into this first book. But there are a lot of them in here. I get a lot of pushback sometimes, like, that's just too unbelievable. And it will be one of the true stories. The woman who made up the imaginary boyfriend, complete with a pair of stinky tennis shoes that she would leave around her apartment to keep her family off her back.
That wasn't you, was it?
That was not me.
Okay.
That was not me. But, certainly there were others that were. And so, they're telling the stories of other people, but it's doing it in a way that's also universal. I think the comedy is stuff that everyone can identify with. When it comes to the character's voice, my character starts out, she's very much embracing this fantasy and wanting to race toward that big wedding. And if you had asked me when I started writing this book, I would have said I wanted the mother of all weddings on the beach in Charleston with 900 of my closest friends. And today, I feel that would never be something that I would pursue. Like, over the course, it's almost as if I was persuaded by my character over the course of writing. I was asked a question not too long ago. I'm a very outgoing person, and someone said, as an outgoing person, do you find that you get lonely writing? And my answer is always like, lonely? There's 10 people in my head, and they won't shut up. I mean, I'm never lonely. I'm never alone because I'm writing. I'm not crazy like that, but like, I know that they don't really talk back to me. But when I write these books, my characters are very real for me. And I think that's what in a way makes you a writer, is that you can tell a 50-year-old male story pursuing adoption, as well as you can tell a young single woman, bridesmaid, longing for her own fairy tale equally. And for me, I feel all those characters. They're very real to me. And telling their story and getting the tone right is very important.
Well, when you started writing, as you took your sabbatical, and you took your long drive.
Still going 7 years later.
And you ended up sitting in a cafe.
The Novel Cafe.
The Novel Cafe in Venice Beach.
Yes.
To write.
Yes.
How has the way you write and the place you write evolved?
Oh, it's become much more business-like. There's 3 parts to writing. There's the fun, sexy part that everyone knows about, where you know, late night coffee, typing. And then there's the sort of promotional part where you're working on marketing, you're editing. That's the nuts and bones of it. And then there's this other part, which is the chore for me, which is the blogging, the tweeting, you know, all these things that the publisher would like you to do that may or may not come naturally. You know, I'm hilarious in 350 words. I'm less hilarious in 140 characters. So tweeting is not necessarily my milieu. And I find that as this becomes a career and not a venture, that it really is. I'm a very regimented, again, the lawyer, writer. So I'm very structured. I have childcare a certain number of days a week. And so from the time the nanny comes to the time the nanny brings home my demon, I am working. And that's the time available to me. So, you know, people ask you about writer's block, etc. I say I don't have the luxury of having writer's block. Like, I just sit down and write. And maybe I'll throw away everything I write on a day when I'm struggling, but I just produce. It's a story I tell all the time. You know, my mother is a writer as well, and we kind of, when I went off to do my own thing, I'm very stubborn, very independent, I set up a little Chinese wall where I said, okay, I'm not gonna be showing you pages. I don't want you asking me to see stuff. I don't want your input. But after a couple weeks of discovering this was a little harder than I thought it was gonna be, I called her up and I said, so hey, how many pages do you write in a day? And she said, well, you know, on a good day, three's an accomplishment. And I was like, okay, great. I'm going to write 6 pages every day until I'm done. Because, you know, mothers and daughters. And that's what I do. And my threshold is I have to write till I hit 6. And I do a little editorial every day. So it's very structured the way I write.
Well, you have, there are different types of writing. And in Leaving Unknown, you have a charming little children's type story that you wrote that someone then illustrated in the book. So you have women's fiction, children's books. Any other ways that you're writing?
I have written a screenplay. I've written an episode of Bones, the television, that will actually be airing next year.
Well, I heard you mention Bones a minute ago. We'll talk about your mom in a minute.
Okay. But yes, so I've written for television. I do articles, particularly off of the first book. I've written a lot of wedding magazine articles, like how-to tips.
Oh, what?
Well, there's one that's called How to Ski Smoothly Through Your Wedding, and it's basically, I was getting ready to go skiing once out in Big Sky, Montana, on one of my cross-country road trips, researching Leaving Unknown, my second book. And as I was getting outfitted for skis, it occurred to me that skiing is a lot like being a bridesmaid. You have uncomfortable shoes that are sort of necessary. You really want to practice before you take on the triple black diamond. So, like, don't go for that updo if you've never tried it out before. You don't want to debut it in front of 300 people. Ditto with the speech. You know, make sure you're prepared before you get on the slopes. Right, and you know, the outfit is very expensive and you're only going to wear it maybe once or twice, but it's necessary for the event. And so I wrote an article basically outlining all the ways that skiing is like being a bridesmaid. And that was such a hit that actually I got a call just recently from Dubai Brides magazine. And they asked me to write a similar style
every tall
piece.
blonde should
I know,
write
right? Who doesn't get Dubai Brides magazine? You all get it, right? So I wrote another piece there, and again, I took a cheerleading analogy. And
well, how did
give me an A, give me a B, give me an R, give me an I, and I spelled out bridesmaid and kind of wrote out the same, you know, the tenets of being a bridesmaid. So that's something that I do. I do tweet. I don't really blog a ton, but I like to meet my readers. So I do book clubs. I go on tour. You know, I do like to keep the contact intimate and in first person.
Well, I also heard you refer to the fact that sometimes you even just do a call into a book club.
Absolutely. And if you visit my website, kerryreichs.com. It has an email contact for me that does come to me directly. Sometimes it takes me a little to get to them all, but I'm a big fan of book clubs. I mean, I really think I love talking to people, and I love the idea of discourse on a book because, again, it goes back to the story I'm trying to tell, that these are things we can all relate to, but there's different elements that are going to strike a chord. You know, people will say, which is your favorite character? What You Wish For was a departure for me. It's a multiple person point of view. And it surprised me how easy it was, how I could be 5 different voices and move between them. And, you know, people who start sometimes have a little bit of a hard time getting into it, but I would say stay with it because the independent stories become very braided at the end, and these characters are very interwoven with one another's stories. But half the fun is getting there and watching where they cross over and connect.
Did you have a physical map of how you had everybody
Oh yeah, that's
working
the lawyer
together?
again. My agent sometimes says, I'd like to see you let loose a little bit, but I'm very outlined. So before I sit down to write anything, I've got the whole plot scripted in my head.
Well, tell us how it was working on a Bones script and a little bit about you and your mom working together.
Fascinating. Well, my mother is Kerry Reichs. She's a thriller writer, and I think she has 16 or 17 New York Times bestsellers. I should probably know that number, but she just keeps
she writes so
churning
fast.
them out.
Knows,
yeah, exactly. It's great fun having a writing family. My mom is a writer. My father's a lawyer. My brother and I were lawyers. My sister is a nurse, so probably the only productive member of society. So my mother welcomed the defection from lawyer camp to writer camp with open arms. We have a lot of fun doing book tours together. We've done international. We've been to Germany, Paris, London, because we're both published in French and German, and so it's fantastic to have the company and just to spend time together. We collaborated on an episode of Bones. And again, she's a producer on the show, but she doesn't do a lot of the writing because they have a full in-house staff. So it's a little different for both of us. And I loved it, but it's just different. When you write a novel, you can say whatever you want. You know, unless you're libeling somebody, you're pretty much in the clear. You can make up places, people, whatever. On the show, they'll say, you know, that was a great idea. We love the idea of the garbage compactor crushing the body. But we did that in season 4. Or, you know, yeah, I see where you're going with that, but standards and practices would never approve. Or, well, but that actor can't really be here on that day, so you got to write him out. Oh, wait, he's available, write him back in. You know, so it really is up to the vagaries of the shooting schedule, the actors, and the limitations of the bonus, really, of being an 8-season, going on 9-season show. So it's fantastic, but it really quite different. I enjoyed it.
Well, so the script that you've worked on, when can we see it here on our local
I wish I could tell
channel?
you a date, but it will be Bones on Fox, but probably around November of next year.
2014.
2013
We're in
fall.
2013.
November
Okay.
of 13, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so-
Next November.
Okay, not too much.
Not too long.
It's not too far away.
Not too long.
I know. Well, give your brother a plug. Is he?
My brother
getting
is
out there?
an ex-lawyer as well. He defected from lawyer to writer camp too. So now my dad, he just retired. He was like, lawyer camp is empty. I'm retiring. So he co-writes with my mom a young adult series.
Oh, isn't that fantastic? And how is that series going?
I think it's doing great. You know, honestly, they do their own thing. So I don't see.
Just
I don't
congratulate
see,
them.
Yeah, exactly. Well done.
Well, I want to go back to you made the remark that you are in print in several languages. With all of your books or with some of your books?
With all of my books, I'm in multiple languages. I think the one that's in the most, Leaving Unknown, is our winner. It's in, Portuguese, Finnish, and then all the classic Spanish, French, German, Italian. It's beloved by Reader's Digest. So Reader's Digest actually has translated it and published it worldwide as part of their condensed books program.
Now, I think I told you that I had written a brief review of the book, Leaving Unknown, for our Bookfest newsletter.
Yes, thank you.
And a gentleman called me to tell me that he had enjoyed the review and he was going to read it. And you remarked to me,
one of my biggest fan groups for Leaving Unknown is senior gentlemen. I get a number of emails, and it's almost like Penthouse Forum. They start with, I never thought I'd be writing this, but... and they follow with, I loved your book. I never thought this is the kind of book I'd be reading. I never thought, this is something I'd pick up. But it came in the mail with my Reader's Digest, and it reminded me of my daughter, my granddaughter, my niece, my neighbor. That's very meaningful for me. I mean, it's translated in full form as well, but I'm so grateful to Reader's Digest because it has opened avenues to me to a whole different demographic. One of the things I dislike about sort of the misnomer of women's fiction or chick lit is that it really, I think, limits your demographic of people who feel that it's going to appeal to them, when I'm telling stories that are familiar, and there is no human who is solely male or female. We're so interacted with our family members, our colleagues, our spouses, our relatives, that every book is something that people are going to enjoy and relate to, because I write comedy. So it's like a movie. You got a lot of characters in there. There's something for everyone in all of these books.
Well, again, that brings up another point. I heard one of your fans tell you that your latest book, What You Wish For, allowed, even though she admitted, as I've admitted, that we are older than you,
right,
the issue that you proposed, she thought made it easier to talk about some issues with her daughters.
Right. Well, the core story of What You Wish For is people who are seeking families in unconventional ways. Today's society right now, we have moved away from the traditional male, female, heterosexual, married, able to have children without medical assistance. People are having children on their own. People are using science and technology to help them with fertility issues. Gay couples are adopting. We've got all kinds of different scenarios of family, and you'll see it in Modern Family and New Normal are on network. It's percolating to the top of our national consciousness, but it's still unfamiliar territory. And the main character here is a woman who's late 30s, struggling with an age-old decision of career versus family, but she's single. So it sort of reinvents the question. There's a male trying to adopt, but again, he's single and he's straight, because we've gotten to the point of comfort with gay couples adopting, but we haven't really looked at the straight male adoption. And one of the comments that I will get is, this is not my story, but I know someone that this is their story. I would like to be able to talk about it, and this is a window on that experience. I find it's a unique window because the next generation of women are going to be more prepared and think about these questions long before they reach a point of crux where the decision must be made. I think my generation, we kind of got caught out. No one is as surprised as I was to find myself in my late 30s and single. I used a sperm donor to have my son. I couldn't be happier. I knew I wanted a family. I knew I wanted children. So in some ways this is my story, but it's not my story. It's a story. Like, I would say that none of my books are about me, but all of them are evolved of my experience and the experience I've seen of my colleagues and friends.
Well, one of the things I noticed, and you alluded to that, this has several voices. These two are the voice of one protagonist. But what I did notice is that although your characters aren't, these are not a series of books, mm-hmm. but you seem to have people meander through one book and the other.
I do.
And how do you manage that?
Well, I like to look back. So my main character in the first book, V. Connolly, her sister is the main character in the second book. Part of that was actually Maeve's fault. I was entirely planning to write a completely different book. And Maeve kept poking me very persistently, like, I have a story, this is my story, I have a story, and I finally was like, okay, I will write your story. And that's where Leaving Unknown came from. Leaving Unknown is definitely my baby. I think with Best Day of Someone Else's Life, I was telling a lot of my stories, and these are all my stories. And with Leaving Unknown, I deal with some very difficult issues. One of my experiences has been some very active fundraising for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. A surrogate niece was diagnosed with ALL when she was 5, and I became a very active fundraiser doing these 100-mile bike rides, which I can assure you I had no intention of doing before Dana became ill. And now I've done 7 of them and become very involved in that community and met a lot of survivors. And it really had me start thinking about, if you think about the ripple effect of a single diagnosis of cancer, how it not only affects the victim and their family, but their friends and their community. And I just looked at that through experience of a survivor. She's lost her best friend to cancer far too young. And as a young woman herself, she's trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces while that is still part of her and move on as the new person she's become. And you realize she's got her own issues as well. This is not my story. You know, I'm not a survivor. I'm fortunate enough that all my friends and family are well, but I'm able to tell this because of my exposure to these folks. And so in a way, I feel like this is the child that I had. So this, in a way, like this may be me, but this is my child. And I love, love, love the story. And what you wish for is sort of maybe my message to a future child. Like this is the letter that I would write to the future, which is there's no one version of the best form of family. That family can come in all different shapes and sizes, and we're doing our kids a disservice to have them mourn the phantom family that they don't have, the adoptive parents, you know, the fantasy real parents as opposed to the adoptive parents who love them, the absent parent when they have one parent who is super focused on them. You know, I think that I'd like to say, if there's one message I could give, there is no best family. There's just maybe a family that's right.
Well, one of the charming parts of this book is your character always looking at her potential donors.
Yes.
Did you go through that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's like apples and oranges. You try to make one stack, you can't. You're like, his medical history is so sexy, but these guys tall, you know? So you're like looking for that tall Stanford grad with no history of cancer in his family back 5 generations. What's hilarious about it is that I think I probably know more about my sperm donor than most people know about their husbands. I mean, I've got medical records on both sides of the family out to second cousins back 4 generations. I know his high school GPA, his SAT scores. You know, it's amazing. I've heard some poetry that he wrote and some music he composed. And, you know, one of the things I was looking for, aside from tall, blonde, and handsome, was something that would supplement a big absence in my life. And I'm Latvian. I'm tone deaf. I have no musical ability. So the donor that I selected he's a musician. He's a composer and a performer. And I thought, great, we'll fill in the gaps of my gene pool with that. And you know, he's also got some scientific background in like engineering stuff.
Well,
I haven't got.
What did the family say about this adventure?
Oh, they're very supportive. I think, you know, if you were born to be a parent and you love kids, it's just obvious. It's a huge part of me, and it always has been. And, you know, I think they were just kind of like, what'd you wait so long for?
Well, Kerry, thank you very much. I've enjoyed speaking with you, and thank you for being one of our authors at Bookfest in 2013.
Well, I'm so grateful to Blue Ridge Book Festival, and thank you for having me.